Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us and some that didn't, best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started. Well, it is a privilege to get to talk with you every week. And will you do us a favor? Will you share this episode with a friend and leave us a review on your platform of choice? It helps us continue to help more and more pastors. That's what we are really passionate about. So thank you so much. Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing. Now, Jesse, I got to ask you something. Did you hear about, so I don't know how I was late on this story. I think I had a busy couple of weeks, but the two NASA astronauts who were supposed to spend 8 days in space at the space station, they've been there 81 days.
Yeah, it's nuts.
81 days. Like, I know you prepare for any kind of eventuality, and apparently they have plenty of food. Like, they're fine. They have work to do. But how would you be feeling if you found out the Boeing Starliner malfunctioned, and guess who's coming to the rescue? SpaceX, Elon Musk. Yeah, NASA came and excuse me.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
Can you help us? Can you imagine that?
No, I mean, obviously these guys are prepared for all kinds of stuff to happen because that's the nature of their work, but 81 days, and it doesn't look like it'll be done until into the new year. I mean, it's crazy. So talk about 8 days gone sideways. I don't know. Their families are like, really?
I know. I hope you like those astronaut ice cream sandwiches or whatever that you get at the gift shops. But those SpaceX rockets are amazing. And you know what? They made me think about church, and they made me think about September. Here's why. So those SpaceX rockets, they launch, they go to space, they do what they got to do. They do all the work, which, by the way, they say that all the work of launch is getting out of the atmosphere. Once you're out of the atmosphere, you're good to go. But all of that energy is spent on the launch. But then these rockets re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, and they park themselves so that they can relaunch all over again. I feel like, isn't that church? That is church every single ministry season. And so this is that time of year, Jesse, we get to talk about what we love talking about, and that is launching in the new ministry year, program year, however you want to frame it. For us, it really revolves around when the kids go back to school, the rhythms of our community and of our people really change. And so for us, it's always right after Labor Day weekend. I know some of our Southern brothers and sisters, they have already started school. They're like a month in already. But we're talking about fall launch time, and what should we be thinking about between now and the sprint to Christmas? I know it's crazy, but it is what it is. So
I mean, it's basically 2025 right now, Jason, is what you're saying.
So what you're telling me is plan my January sermon.
That's right.
Kind of, right? So fall plans, are you guys in the same spot? Has school started yet? Are you like right on the cusp? Where are you guys right now in the
We
rhythm?
are a state where most of our schools start the week after Labor Day, or somewhere right around that. So we're more similar to you guys and have family in the South. They've been back to school a couple weeks already. But we kind of tend to plan our fall launch around the school year launch. And I don't know if that same rhythm works in the southern states or not, or if you wait for football season and that's your clue to start. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
I was just on a trip up to the northwest coast with my family, and there was a guy with the Georgia hat and a guy with the University of Tennessee hat. And they were talking SEC football at the northwesternmost point in the continental United States. And I was like, it must be the fall. It's football season. It's time to go. So I imagine the southern states, you do it around, kickoff Sunday or something like that.
Yeah, I love it. So fall plans, what are you guys at Marine View looking at right now? Kind of what's your rhythm? I know you just got back from vacation, so I know you probably got going through all your emails and everything, but what's the rhythm of these next few weeks as you're trying to figure out launch time?
Yeah, for us, it's really thinking about how do we meaningfully ramp up into the fall without over scheduling our families and our congregation that already have a lot of other on-ramp kinds of things going on for school and life and whatnot. And so we try to think in terms of meaningful opportunities for people to connect, especially for newer people to connect, to pray for our students and teachers as they begin the new year. And really, we're looking at our primary focus is helping people find connection in community groups in September. So that kind of is our focus. We launch things back. We start to get our feet under us. We communicate all that's happening throughout the fall with a focus on the next step being, hey, find a group. Let's go. Let's be in a circle, not a row.
Yeah. I love that. Ours is very, very similar. What we're looking at right now, that's number one on our list. We're getting our small group lineup together. Who's teaching, what building space they need, or they're meeting off campus, what topic, all that stuff is all because we launch right at the end of September, early October, our new round of groups. So I'm sure you probably have a similar rhythm. And then for us, for any of our listeners who listened to last week's episode where I'm like, I hate recording by myself, man. It's such a drag. It's such a drag. But I was just talking about a challenge that we have with, we had our session didn't make quorum and we weren't able to meet for the first time in 15 years as a pastor. I've never had that happen. So we're talking through how to make sure our staff and session retreat coming up. And by retreat, it's just a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
To get on the same page with mission, vision, strategy. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. And then getting eyes on all the events we do between now and Christmas, similar to you, making sure that we are pacing ourselves well, that we are covering as much ground as possible regarding to, are we reaching older generations, younger generations, middle-aged generations? Are we giving them the same amount of kind of opportunities or on-ramps into the life of the church? These are all things we're looking at right now.
Yeah. And I think we've talked a little bit about this in past episodes, but even just getting the dates on the calendar, thinking ahead, and asking people in your congregation to save the date or at least to be aware of the dates so that they goes, well, they're actually planning ahead. There's credibility here. They're thinking about these events, but it also helps us as a staff team kind of pace our own planning. We know that 6 weeks from now, we have the trunk or treat event, or it's probably more than that. It's like 8-9 weeks probably from now, but we know that's coming. And so we're communicating about it in a one line kind of way. And I know you guys typically do a bullet point postcard, I think, of your key dates. And we've done something similar.
Yeah.
Like that, just to kind of say to people, look at all the great things that are coming up. There's not a ton of details. It's usually the date, maybe the time and the title of the event. But, it just helps people get a sense of here's what's coming up. We've been thinking ahead. We're excited about it. And we can't wait for you to be a part of it with us.
That's good. I think, listen, you and I, we've done this now for a lot of rounds.
Yeah.
And we learned some things along the way of what to do and what not to do. And so I thought it'd be good. Maybe we just share some tips on how to ensure a successful launch, whatever that looks like. In your church, whatever it looks like, as you're trying to figure out this time of year. It's such a good time of year. I know a lot of churches do a back to church Sunday. That's never really been our bag. We kind of have our own thing, our own way of doing it. We have Tower Hill Day and we have pancakes and everything. So nothing brings people together like pancakes.
That's right. Yeah.
Somebody said, so I had the honor of leading a session retreat in Huntsville, Alabama. Last week, well, actually it's 2 weekends ago now. And we were talking about how it's amazing that every generation, talking about multi-generations interacting, they will interact over pancakes. And somebody on their elder team said the phrase, the pancake effect. And I said,
Nice.
Wouldn't that be a good book title or something? The pancake effect.
Totally.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah,
but anyway, we're trying to figure out when is our thing going to be. What's our pathway? What are our stepping stones? So let's go through some things that I think are important to think about. And we can maybe riff on that a little bit according to what we're used to doing. And the first is this. You have to figure out, and I'm living this right now. You have to make the calendar work for you and not against you. In other words, you can't stack your life and everything you want to get done as a church so heavily that you're sacrificing what matters most in the process. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about these things before. If you're new to us, here's just a quick review. get out a sheet of paper. This is a practice I learned from Michael Hyatt that I love. Sheet of paper, make a few columns starting from left to right. What do I love? Next column, what do I hate? And this is private. You don't have to share this with anybody.
That's right.
What can I eliminate? What can I delegate?
Mm-hmm.
And what can I automate?
Yeah.
So love, hate, eliminate, delegate, automate, and just make a list of, it could be with your job. It could be just with the rhythm of your schedule, and some things you can do nothing about. Like they just are, and you might hate them and they take up a spot in your schedule. That's fine. But the goal is to figure out, I'll bet there are some things that don't need to be on your plate. And I think as leaders, we always need to be taking a look at the plate. What's on it? What can I hand off in a really healthy way to spread the responsibility around and spread, the opportunities other people have to lead as well.
Yeah. The spot on.
Yeah.
I think that's really crucial. And it's difficult as a leader because we're used to having a lot of balls in the air and plates spinning and we're multitasking and all that kind of thing. And so sometimes if we don't stop and think about what we could hand off or what we need to eliminate or take off our plate or give away, we'll just keep spinning all those plates for better or worse. And some are going to start crashing sooner or later, probably. I had an example of this just a couple weeks ago. We were reviewing our HR handbook and we needed to update our grievance policy. Not that anybody would ever complain about me to anybody else, but what's the chain of command if somebody has a complaint or a concern or something that goes outside of the supervisor, line, and how do we do that? And so I was researching and doing things, and one of our elders was meeting with me about it, and she said, "Why are you doing this? I will go find a good grievance policy for us, and then I'll bring it for you to look at. You don't need to spend your time on this." And it was just a reminder, oh, yes, somebody else could do that. And probably she's going to do a way better job than I would have just found the first thing I Googled and be like, oh, that's probably good enough. So it's going to be better. So we have to keep, as leaders, we have to keep coming back to this. It's so important because we will add things to our plate. We like to be moving and have plenty of things to be working on, but there are a lot of things that we could hand off, and we should, so that it frees up our space to really do the things that only we can do.
Absolutely. And by the way, this step of what we're talking about is, I love doing this. I love doing it a couple times a year. It's usually now and January are the 2 times a year that I pay attention to this, but I love it because it's changed my life. I would not be able to do all the things in my life that I do if I had not been really intentional about going through this on a regular basis, because I will chase shiny objects just like anybody else. And that's not always the best thing for me or the people around me. So then when you have a good idea of what's on your plate, I think a really healthy thing is to make sure that, what are the first things that need to be first? What are the most important things that need to go on your plate before anything else? And to me, that's all about calendaring. I'm analog with my calendar, and I know you've seen this before, Jesse. This episode might go on video, but we kind of I got color codes. I got all sorts of stuff going on and it's the only way I have found to make sure that the things I really want to get done. So the reason it helps me so much is I know tomorrow how I'm going to be spending my time. Do things come up? Of course they come up. But if I know tomorrow, oh, geez, the whole morning is sermon writing morning. So I'm not going to take any meetings during that time. I'm not going to schedule something else because that is really important time every week that I can't sacrifice. Or even I put my devotional time in because it just reminds me that's what I'm doing tomorrow morning at this time. And it really helps me. I feel less anxiety about my list of things that need to get done because I know I have a plan of how I'm going to attack all of those things.
Yeah. And I think what happens when you have good handle on your rhythm and routine of your time management, then when exceptions do come along, you can break from your routine to a point and still be okay because you're going to get back to that rhythm and routine. And I've noticed that the times where I've kind of drifted from this discipline and I'm kind of making it up week to week or day to day or something, you're kind of just feeling your way through the dark, and it's harder to be productive and I don't know, I think more thorough in your work or whatever, and you start missing stuff. And so I think those are some key things that when you're developing your schedule, make sure the very most important things get on there first. Your devotional time, your sermon writing time, maybe it's your time to sit there with a blank sheet of paper and dream about stuff. I don't know, whatever the key things are. And then see what's left over and begin to fill in. I like to leave some free area on my calendar because sometimes you got to flex a little bit. And so I don't like to have I don't know. Do you fill in every minute of every day, or do you kind of have some space?
No, I think in terms of blocks, and when I feel like I'm kind of done, because I don't know that I always take up all the time in the block.
Yeah.
So I'll just allow that to be unscheduled. And that really works for me. So I feel like it's designated if I want to use it for that, but there's usually some extra time in there.
Yeah, you want to create flexibility so that you're not feeling this rigidity to your routine that becomes
right, because you won't stick with it if you don't like it.
Yeah, I think the other piece for me is, and something I haven't tried but I've always had good intentions about, is setting something of office hours. And I think you do a good job of scheduling. You set aside amount of time that you can meet with people, and that's kind of it for the week.
Yeah.
And I kind of do it more anecdotally or one-off, and I don't know that serves me super well. And so actually Andrew, our assistant pastor here, he's like, why don't you set some office hour times every week, and if people want to come meet with you, that's when they can do that, and they can schedule that with the office, and then you don't have to kind of chase meetings with people. It's sort of a few dedicated times that you have set aside for that, kind of in the block mentality. So I think those are the kinds of things that can set you up for success, and you're, instead of chasing your schedule, it's serving you instead.
Yeah. And we'll link in the show notes. There's a whole episode we did on this at some point. I don't remember what number it was. So I'll go back and look and link
we had
it.
that many episodes now where at some point we talked about it. We say that quite a lot.
I know. We've talked about everything a few times. So anyway, I know there's a whole episode we did on the time management piece. So we'll link to that. Okay. Here's the second one. This is more to do with ministry. So first is calendar to make the ministry possible. And the second is something that we are looking at right now, because I think one of the challenges of church and the week-to-week experience of church is that we're really good at rhythm. We're really good at routine. I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. We're really good at that. We know how to do that. I think where we get stuck is we don't do a great job of creating moments for people to have, I don't know how else to say it. It's not necessarily emotional, but it is emotional. But having an emotional reaction or a more visceral experience to their faith, because worship, the way that it is, tends to be a very passive endeavor. Yes, there's some singing and some standing, and depending on how you do communion, there may be some movement that way. But largely, it's kind of a passive exercise. And I think what happens is Christians get lulled to sleep by it being sort of passive and routine. Like, that combination doesn't always serve it well. So I'm a big fan of creating some kind of spiritual waypoints or creating moments. Mm-hmm. And so this is what this second one is about. How do we create more moments that lead to movement? Mm-hmm. If you want to draw people or engage people in their faith, how do we do it with all of their senses, not just their brain or their ears on a Sunday morning? So here's what I'm getting at. I think you could do that through, let's start with sacraments. I mean, baptism. We started a few years ago. This was actually in the middle of the pandemic. We started accommodating for immersion baptism as an option in our regular worship service. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this. We bought the tank, and it's been awesome. And so what happens is people long for this experience, mm-hmm. and we always give them an option of how they want to be baptized if they're adults. And adults, confirmation age and older, if they want to be immersed or not, and they always pick immersion. Mm-hmm. Because for them, and what they say every time is just, I just feel it more, the act of going under the water and coming out. There's something really powerful in that. And then once we started doing that, the floodgates opened up, I guess, pun intended, but they really opened up, and more people wanted to do it. When they saw others doing it, they're like, man, I would love to have that experience. And we just had this last weekend, our 3rd annual beach baptism, where we offer first-time baptisms and we offer remembering your baptisms. And the difference is not much. It's just theologically, in the Reformed tradition, we don't believe in rebaptism. So what we say is, remember your baptism in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And then we dunk them, right? So we do it. And this last one was a great reminder of the power of these moments that lead to movement. So it's the stories that you hear. So there's a college student who was baptized, who I didn't know it at the time, as a bit of a side hustle. Listen, we got to pay for college. I teach public speaking online at our local community college. One of the students started attending church with their family. She was baptized this last weekend with her whole family there. We had a mother and a daughter on the high school soccer team, told all of her friends on the soccer team she was getting baptized, and had another kid say, how can I do that? We had a Jewish woman who was invited by a friend at the gym a year ago to come to church. She got baptized. Last year, we had a mom whose 2 teenage boys wanted to be baptized. They had lost their father a few months before, quite tragically. And I'll never forget when they came up out of the water, and the older son gave me a hug and he said, thank you for doing this. I'm like, thank me for doing this. This is the privilege of my life. And every time we do that event, you see the emotion and the power of that moment. And it's powerful for me. Honestly, after every single time, I have the same thought, and I shared with my wife. I'm just like, this is why I became a pastor, for this right here. This is why. So I think people are looking for these spiritual waypoints, and what's a way that we can make it more visceral, more engaging, more of a moment that leads to movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, Jason. And I think part of it is creating a sense of, we're all in this together. Lack of a better word, if you promote it well in advance, it's not just you show up on that day and you say, hey, this afternoon, if anybody wants to come, we're going to baptize some people at the beach. I imagine that it was weeks of, hey, baptism Sunday's coming up. We'd love for you to come and support those that are being baptized. It's going to be so great. And if that's you, I'd love to talk with you about that. I'm sure there was a lot of that building up to that moment. And I think that's maybe as important as the thing itself, because if you miss that front end, then that moment can fall flat, or people feel like, I didn't hear about it, I missed out on it, I didn't know. So I think planning that ahead and picking some times, and one of the things in the Reformed tradition, we cheat a little bit because we don't think salvation is tied to the moment of baptism, that it's the outward sign of an inward reality, all the things, right, the theology of it. And so we can set some dates and say, this is baptism Sunday. We're going to do this. And we do it twice a year here at Marine View. One, we offer baptism in our sanctuary. We had a dunk tank at one point, and then we said, our floor, I don't know if we can handle it. I don't know. So in the fall,
it's a risk reward kind of thing.
Yeah, we do the sprinkling or water on the head in the fall using the baptismal font. And in June, we do our baptisms down at the beach, right down the road from Marine View, in the Puget Sound. It's 48 degrees.
It's got to be so cold.
We'll not forget your baptism if you do it that way. And we find that people, kind of depending on who they are, will prefer one or the other. But we've made it part of the rhythm of our life and something that people now look forward to and anticipate. And this last one in June, we had just an awesome response of people being baptized. But also my favorite part alongside that was, because we had been promoting it for about 6 weeks and letting everybody know, just about the whole congregation showed up. We celebrated these baptisms. Then we had pizza and cake afterward as like all these people down at this beach. And I imagine all the neighbors around were like, what is happening down there? It's just, and so we always have people walk by and go, what are you guys doing? And that's so
Yeah.
cool. So I think, those are the things I like that language you use, waypoints, spiritual waypoints, or maybe you call them catalytic experiences that
Yeah.
cause someone to take a step forward in their faith journey, or it kind of calls the question and says, are you ready to do this? Are you, what does it look like to mature and grow in faith and to take a step like this? And so I think that's a good example of the kind of thing we're talking about. And there's other ways to do this, something similar. We did a VBS Sunday this year, which I was a little anxious about. Will people show up for this? All the people who worked hard all week long for VBS and all those families that are not church families, are they going to show up on a Sunday? Well, we promoted it for like 6 weeks and we worked really hard at it and we got people jazzed up about it and we talked about it and we invited and we re-invited and we did. And then by the time it got to that day, it ended up being an awesome celebration. But you can't just last minute your way to those kinds of things.
Yeah. It just really doesn't, it usually doesn't work that way. And here's the other thing. Have we not created these moments? I don't know if we would have caught these people who ended up coming to the baptism. I don't know if we would have really caught them to engage them in the life of the Christian faith or the life of the church had we not offered it. So I think part of it's the offering, thinking through it and making it available. And I think a great place to start is, because some churches may just like, gee, it's just, it's me and the custodian and I don't know how to pull this off. And that's fine, but you're probably doing communion on a regular basis. What if you tried doing something a little different with communion? So maybe if you don't do intinction, try intinction. And you can always have somebody, an elder, go around and serve it to people who can't physically get up and go forward. But even just that act of getting up and go forward. And then think of your words around the words of institution. So you give the words of institution, but then I'll say something like, today, when you get up and you receive the body and the blood of Jesus Christ, you're saying yes all over again to a life of faith.
Yeah.
Let this be your yes. In a way, it's sort of an altar call around the sacrament. Mm-hmm. And it feels that way to people. So I think the sacraments are a great place to start. And then there's, of course, the rest of the worship service where energy and emotion are a part of the experience. And here's the criticism I hear of this. I usually hear this more from a traditional crowd that says, we're not here to entertain. We're here to worship God. I agree, but I don't agree with your premise that it's entertainment necessarily. Do some churches do that? Yes, of course. But I would ask them, when you sing Amazing Grace, why does that lift your soul? It's because you love that hymn. You could sing every verse with no words. It reminds you of God's goodness and mercy. It reminds me of pivotal times in your life. And you walk out of church saying, that was great today. Mm-hmm. Was it because of the instrumentation? Was it because of the tone of the organ? No, it had everything to do with the emotional relationship you had with that song. It was based on the same thing. Emotion is why you felt worship was so powerful that day. It's the same thing. So the question is, how do you just bake that into the service? How do you intentionally design moments that lead people through taking a step? You could do it through music and prayer, celebration. You're celebrating, confirmation students or whatever you want to celebrate. 50-year members. You do it through your message and you do it through the sacrament. So that's a big one. I know it's a long one, but creating moments that lead to movement.
Yeah.
But then here's why the next part's so important. This is number 3. This is the third tip. You want to make sure you have somewhere to move them to. Mm-hmm. Have we made it clear in our strategy, like, what does it look like for somebody to take a step towards Jesus? Mm-hmm. What does it look like relationally? And then what does it look like programmatically? And this is all about discipleship pathway. Like, what is our strategy for bringing someone as a first-time guest all the way to engaged leader? What does that look like? If you don't have a strategy, I think that's a great place to start.
Mhm.
What is our strategy? What's our strategy from online person who fills out a card to showing up in person in a Bible study? What does that even look like? How do we get there? Like stones on a pathway, what are our stepping stones?
Mhm.
And they could really be whatever you want, but they need to be there. Or it's like asking somebody to follow you like 100 yards away through the forest.
Mhm.
There's just too many ways they can get lost. So, do you guys spend time thinking or talking about this? Is this baked into your routine? I assume that it is, but
Yeah.
say
I
maybe a little
mean,
bit about
I
your.
mean, isn't, yeah, one of the things we're always going to be thinking about or asking related to an event or even to a church service is what's the next thing for that person, or what's the invitation? And sometimes the end of the sermon, the invitation is, hey, come back next week and hear more. We just
Yeah.
finished the series in Jonah. Come back and hear about Jonah and what happens after he gets vomited onto dry land or whatever. Like, so, but what's the thing that you're going to ask them to do or invite them to do next? And in September, we're going to be inviting people to move towards groups. That's the, so hey, if you were part of VBS this summer, if you were part of newer to our life and you've been attending church, we'd love for you to consider being a part of one of our groups and get connected more closely in with community. And we'd love to have you do that. But we're thinking in terms of what's the next part of the pathway. And for us, it kind of breaks along 4 lines. And we know that everybody's in different places with different needs. Some are church people coming in looking to immediately get involved. Others are just brand new and they kind of need an introduction to faith or something. So we have a handful or a variety of parts of the pathway so that you can have a little bit more customizable, if for lack of a better word, approach to each person. Say, it sounds like you need connection, or you need a Bible study where you can go deeper and learn more, or you need the opportunity to serve. And so we're going to plug you into, getting involved with our outreach and missions team. Or, hey, you're kind of like a church veteran. Let's steer you towards some leadership, and how can we help you do that? And maybe that's your next step. So kind of creating within those pathways some variety for that meet people where they are in
Yeah.
their own spiritual journey.
Yeah, because whatever your overall pathway is, it's built on a bunch of smaller pathways.
Yeah.
So, for example, your overall strategy is we're going to put together a bunk bed in my son's room. So I want to go from whatever he has now to this new bed. That's the overall strategy.
Yep.
So, but you do that in steps, right? You don't just do it
Mhm.
all at once. You
Yep.
put together the frame, you assemble the ladder, you put in the mattresses, whatever. So thinking about your pathway, you just have to ask, what are the steps? What are the steps to get them from community into the congregation on Sunday morning? And then what's the step for getting them to in the congregation to meeting people in the congregation, fellowship?
Yep.
And then what's the step from fellowship to attending a small group or a Bible study or serving or giving?
Yeah.
And then what is the step that we hope will get them to a place of leadership? And every single one of those could be multiple steps, but that's how you build the pathway. Because some
Yeah,
people are
exactly.
like, you keep saying pathway, Jason, and I don't know what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that's just it. What are the steps we need to help bring
I think
people from one place
your
to another?
image of pathway is just right. And paving stones, just think of paving stones on a
Yeah.
pathway. What goes on each one to move people down the pathway of faith? And do whatever you think is best going to help you do that. And I do think it is helpful to think about what the end goal is. What's at the end of the pathway? Well, on this side of eternity, it doesn't ever quite end, right? That pathway goes on as we mature and grow. But I think the goal is something like to present people mature in Christ, to help them grow into their identity as a Christian, and to mature in that faith, and to now bear fruit in that faith, and become bearers of the mission alongside the leadership. So I think there are things that we look to, sort of, we go, what is our ultimate kind of goal or hope for people? Our prayer for people is that we would find mature followers of Jesus who are making a kingdom impact in our community. Like that's what we want to move people toward. And it's all these steps along the way to get us there. And we're all on our own path. You and I, we're still walking on that path.
Yeah.
And some people would say, well, I don't know if you're very far along the path, Jason, but we're all growing and developing. And so what's the next step in your path or my path, and helping other think in those terms too.
Yeah. So listen, you're hoping to launch things this fall. We kind of gave you just a few different targets to hit at. I would suggest don't feel like you got to hit all these at once, but I would say start with your calendar and just start planning, making the plan for how you're going to spend your time, because you don't want to shortchange the people that matter most in your life as a result of doing the Lord's work. I don't think that's what the Lord wants. And then, maybe it's, hey, let's think more about creating moments for people, or let's think we got to really nail down our pathway and think about that for the fall. Like maybe if we want to break it down, say, what does it look like between now and Christmas? What pathway are we trying to create to invite people to take a step? And then here's the last tip. The last tip is this: hold your expectations loosely. And to remember, it's not just about numbers, but impact.
Yeah.
It may take a while for things to get traction. You may do things once and it feels like, oh my gosh, we had like hardly anybody. It's okay. Yeah. It doesn't mean give up. It just, sometimes these things take a while to get going, especially in church life.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, you were down in Huntsville, Alabama. I mean, they've got all the rockets down there and all that. You're talking about SpaceX and launching and relaunching. Well, every iteration, there's learning and growing and getting better at it, so that the next launch is more successful than the last one. And there's sort of momentum that builds in any organization or anything that you're trying to do effectively. And so stick with it. And I think you talked about how when you started your small group ministry there at Tower Hill, you just had a couple of groups, and now it's 60% of your people. I can't remember, but you guys have done an awesome job of really establishing a strong small group ministry. But it took years to do. It didn't just happen instantly. But you began to move in that direction, and I think that's what you're saying. Hold your expectations loosely, because when you start something worthwhile, sometimes the temptation is to give up on it too soon, instead of sticking with it and seeing the momentum and the impact grow over time. So don't be discouraged if it's not like a grand slam the first time out of the gate. It might set the foundation for some really good things going forward.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks everyone for listening. This was a little bit of a long one, but I hope it's really helpful as you get in and start slogging away. Any last thoughts here, Jesse, before we sign off this week?
Just such good reminders, Jason, and coming back to that Michael Hyatt stuff. I'm like, my brain was split in two immediately when you brought that up. I was like, I need to get that back out and do that. And just a good reminder on some key disciplines for us to be working on as we head into the fall.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. We'll see you next week.